This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I'm your host, Steve Anderson, and today our guest is Stacey Hanke, a leading expert in communications and influence. For over 20 years, she has empowered Fortune 500 leaders and teams to elevate their communication skills to build their trust and credibility needed to influence action. In addition to being a Hall of Fame speaker, executive coach, and business leader, Stacey is the author of 3 books. Her most recent book has just been released this last October, and we're going to be talking about Influence Elevated, which is her second book, quite a bit during this interview. It provides leaders with skills to manage employees and increase accountability in a hybrid work environment. Stacey is here to share her insights on improving our ability to influence and inspire Monday to Monday. So Stacey, thanks for being on the program today. It's really great to have you.
Oh my goodness, you too. And the big thank you to you for inviting me and just trusting me with your followers.
Well, I'm looking really forward to it. So just give us a little context here. Where did you grow up and kind of what was your first jump into the business world and where are you today? So just give us a short summary of your journey.
Yeah, I think that where I grew up is kind of where I am today, or why I got to this point. I grew up on a farm. I grew up on a dairy farm in central Wisconsin. I'm now based in Chicago. And I remember always saying I couldn't wait to get off the farm. When I look back, my team and I, we talk a lot about how to communicate with influence Monday to Monday. And Stephen, that whole concept of Monday to Monday, I always tie it back to just watching my mom and dad, because they would make the planting season would happen usually in the spring. Then the consistency of how their drive and their work Monday to Monday until the fall, because fall is the harvest time, that would always predict our finances. So this whole entrepreneur works lifestyle is really all I know, because I just following my dad. Well, fast forward 24 years into this company, I noticed when I was in the corporate world shortly out of college, I always noticed that just because leaders had that title or they were super smart, whatever their credentials were, if they could not communicate clearly, it really doesn't matter how smart you are. I started to get a real deep curiosity on this whole idea of communication. When I went to the next level with it, I realized, wow, this whole idea, if you really want to influence people, it's not just for the big sales pitch or the big boardroom conversation, but it really is, how do you influence day to day, truly just simply by how you show up, whether in your personal life or in your professional life. And now the last 4 years, Stephen, it's how do you show up in the multitude of mediums, virtual, hybrid, in person, that it just has made it a lot more difficult.
Yeah, it's certainly complicated, that's for sure. I'm just going to hold up the book here for those that are watching this on video. So here's your book, and it's very well done. It's a beautiful book, and as a matter of fact, it's well put together. So thanks for sharing it with me. So the Monday to Monday, I know you use that a lot, and it's actually, did you actually copyright it?
We did.
Yeah, that's amazing. So
We
what is
wanted
that?
to keep it.
Yeah, so that's your own, that's your phrase. That's impressive.
That's
Yeah.
our phrase. It's fun too, Stephen, when I go on corporate sites and visits with my team. And if it's a company we've been with for a while, you're walking by people that have exposure through our mentoring or my keynotes, and they're always like, oh, it's right, Monday to Monday.
Yeah.
It definitely sticks. They remember it. And they know what it means too, which is even more powerful.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So let's talk, you talk about influence and in reading the book and when I first saw it and whatever, it's kind of weird because some people look at the word influence as a negative word, like that's somehow controlling or manipulating or whatever. So maybe help us
Sure.
define influence as you see it.
And I think it can be, if it's used inappropriately, it definitely can be intimidating. Influence to us, we define it as your body language and your messaging. Those two are always consistent Monday to Monday.
Okay.
We also say that influence means that if you want to be perceived as trustworthy, credible, confident, or whatever adjective comes to mind, that has to be constant. But for example, Stephen, how you see me and how you're experiencing me today is pretty much the same. If we would sit down and we'd have brunch or we'd be in person, it's the inconsistency of when people show up a certain way here, or they really turn on their A game, so to speak. They're really focused for the big high stakes boardroom conversation. Yet you meet them off of that type of situation and there's someone different. And I'm sure we all know people like that. And
Yeah.
to me, that's the biggest change that has even occurred over the last 4 years. There's so much noise. There's so many ways that we now could connect with people, but yet we're disconnected. And I think it is because we really don't know what influence is. Influence isn't something you turn on and you turn off. Most people will do that. They'll come to me and say, can you help me prepare for a big presentation? And I will always say to them, well, no, because that's not going to do you any good, no value. But how can I enhance how you come across, the level of influence that you have in just your day-to-day conversations? And then we'll work towards when the stakes are really high. Maybe you're delivering something more formal like a presentation. It's the clarity of what influence really is, as I just shared it with you, versus this idea of I'm manipulating people. Influence to me is you're really there to educate them, to guide them, to get them to a better place or a better solution.
And in the book, you actually quote that 95% of people uh, think they are more influential than they actually are.
And that was just years of our research. And why I think that is, most of us have never seen ourselves through the eyes and ears of our listeners. Therefore, we just go off of feeling. If I feel good, if I'm comfortable today, I know you really well, then I must be good. The other piece is we don't get constructive feedback on what works for us, what's not working for us. So instead, we assume that our title, our years of experience, or if we've been told through others often, good, nice job, great. We assume that all of that determines the level of influence that we have.
Yeah, and that comes back to just reading your audience, so to speak. I mean, people that, we've all seen it where they'll start and they think they're just doing great, and then they'll look and say, "Hey, I'm not connecting, or something's wrong here," and so they adjust, and so that's kind of what you're saying in a way, right?
I am, but here's the scary part. Most people don't even realize it. They're not picking up the cues that people are bored. People are multitasking, right? They're on their phone and their heads are down. And instead, when you see this happening, individuals will start talking louder, faster, torturing their
Yeah.
listeners even more in hopes that, well, that will eventually grab your attention. There's this huge, I mean, you can tell I'm so intrigued by this concept of we're not aware of how our behaviors come across. We're not always aware of how our words land, our tone of our voice. There's a lot to really look at because when you're trying to influence someone virtually or in person, you have no idea how many conversations they had before you. That's noise. And what can you do that perhaps, influence sometimes doesn't happen in the first interaction? That's the other complicated piece to it. You may need 5, 10 interactions with this one person before they finally act. What do you want them to remember though about you? So they don't forget you. They don't forget your message in between all those times that you communicate with them to eventually get that relationship, to eventually build that trust that gets them to influence and act on what you're saying.
And you also state that, the people that we're trying to influence a lot of times just aren't paying attention.
Yeah.
As you said, they have their mobile devices, they have their laptops, they have the meeting before that they were sensitive about, or they're thinking about what's going on when they leave this
Right.
meeting. So, how do you minimize that and get people to pay attention? Do you have rules about engagement when you have these meetings, or do you just or you develop your skills so that they're just going to pay attention because you know what you're doing?
That's number one, right? I think if you invite everyone to a meeting, you need to do the work. to make sure you're engaging, you're connecting, you've got impact, and people trust you. And that all has to be in line. Well, how do you do that? That's like a whole nother podcast. There's numerous skill sets that we teach. And then it's the messaging, making sure, you brought this up earlier, Stephen, that the message is always, you're always adapting it to their knowledge level. You're adapting it to the lane that they're in. So a lot of it is your delivery and your messaging. And then number two, going off of the question you had asked, is it, are there rules of engagement? You have to do the work again to make it inviting, that it's a conversation for all of you. It'd be as if you did all the talking on this podcast or vice versa, and one of us, that we say nothing. Well, then why even have the conversation?
Yeah.
To think the piece that people take for granted is if I call a company meeting and everyone's on Zoom, that suddenly everyone should be engaged and listening and participating. Not in today's world. Because you have no idea what's outside this Zoom window. You have no idea what they're thinking about, what they have to do yet today, or what they have dealt with this weekend or last night, whatever it is. You really have to do that work. And that's the piece people don't realize. Just because you invite them to a meeting does not mean they have to listen. That's the first step to get bodies on this Zoom call. It's now, what do you do to make sure that they feel like you're talking with me? You're really in tune to what is important to me. And that action step is something that is very clear. It's not complicated, and it's achievable.
And I think that comes with, great leaders need to be also good facilitators.
Yes.
I mean, how do you bring people in, and how do you ask questions, and how do you keep their interest going, and how do you just, not just spew out all this information and think it's all sinking in, because we know it doesn't.
Yeah. That's a big piece, is the questioning. In my third book, we talk a lot about mindful listening. And the purpose of mindful listening is first asking the right question. And the question I'm not referring to, Stephen, is how are you? Because everyone asks it, right? But it's kicking off these conversations with broad, open-ended questions. That way, your listener, they're feeding you with information, with knowledge, everything you need, their words, to figure out, well, what question do you ask next, as well as to figure out what lane are they in? Where are they in this moment of time with this topic? So I'll give you an example, Stephen. A question that I will ask to facilitate this engagement interaction when I hop on a call with someone I don't know is something of fact of, what is happening in your team, or what is happening in your company right now that led you to want to have a conversation today? And then you learn to be quiet and absorb, mindfully absorb, listen. That's going to really gear you on where you need to go. Too many times, leaders or anyone, they are so caught to this agenda. I'm not saying, I think you need agenda, you need a roadmap, but you've got to be able to take detours with the unexpected construction. That is usually a comment from an audience member or nonverbal behavior by a member that tells you they don't need that info, or they're bored, or that you just went over their head. They don't understand it. That takes focus.
Yeah, and I think a story that was a true story for me is I sat on this national board once, and there was a gentleman who never said a word in a whole year of board meetings. But in the bar, in the evening, you'd ask him something, and he was really smart, and he had all these great ideas. So then the next year I became the president of the board. And so I just had a little Post-it note on my agenda, and it said every 30 minutes, ask this guy a question. And so, it was like, because they were kind of all day board meetings. And so I would just say, and what do you think about that? And then everyone's like, man, he's really got some good ideas. So I think that especially extreme introverts struggle jumping into a conversation with multiple people. So understanding each and everybody's personality and who's in the room and helping facilitate that can be a good piece of it as well, I think.
And maybe we just need to go back to 80-20. As a leader, facilitator of the meeting, you speak 20%. Let them speak 80%. Because what's happening is they're constantly steering you in the direction what they need. You also increase the likelihood that you'll influence action, because now their words are your words.
Yeah. Now, getting back to Monday. So what does that mean to you? Does that mean consistency?
Yeah.
Is that okay? So it basically means that, you just can't be on performance mode during, your few meetings during the week. It's interactions with people all day long. It's a consistent way you are that people begin to know and trust.
That's exactly it. It's twofold. Monday to Monday means that your body language and messaging, they're always consistent. And then exactly what you're saying, you always show up in a way that people can trust. Because the minute you're not consistent, you start to create doubt in your listener's mind.
Yeah, totally. One of the things in the book too you bring out here is the myths of influence, and there's three of them. So why don't you just describe that to us a little bit about what are the myths of influence?
And you need to help me out, Stephen. I just got
Okay.
done writing book number 3, and I'm thinking, okay, which
Okay.
myths are you
I got it.
referring
I took a
to?
chance on that. So let me go. So number one is I feel influential more than I am, and we already talked about that.
Yes.
And then influence is situational, and I think that probably comes to the consistency thing. It's
It's
all the time.
exactly. You can't turn
Yeah.
this on and off. It's not like a faucet. You just can turn on and off.
Yeah. And then the third one is the one that I think most people can definitely identify with. Just because you have a title does not mean you have influence, right?
Stephen, and I bet you can with your well and the work that you do, you'll get this when I say I have worked with CEOs whose assistants are more influential than they are. I'm wondering if this is what happens as we climb the corporate ladder and our years of experience, our titles, suddenly feedback becomes so flawed. Who's going to tell the CEO they take too long to get to the point? By the time we get them, when I mentor, I'm mostly mentoring CEOs and their executive teams. Frequently, they'll say to me, "You're telling me things no one has ever said to me. Why doesn't someone say this to me?" A lot of it's your title, unless you might have some followers that are thinking, "Oh, my executive team always gives me feedback," which is amazing. I have a couple of clients that have really created that culture of open, honest, constructive feedback. It's
Yeah.
rare. Think about it. If you just continue to get promoted and now you've got that title, you definitely have a track record of experience and successes. It's that assumption of, I should know how to do this. I was working with a group of partners at a firm about a week ago. There was a partner in particular. She said to me, I'm embarrassed to say this. I have been a partner for 10 years. These communication skills you're teaching me, no one has ever taught me them. All I keep thinking about is how in the world have I been a partner for 10 years? And I've always thought I'm a good communicator. And that's really the work that my team and I do. We love working with someone who already is good, they're successful, and we treat it like an athlete, a professional athlete, and able to take them to a whole nother level that they have no idea even exist.
Yeah, and I think that's a common misconception too, that, a lot of people, you always hear the argument, well, they're just naturally a leader. And I'm sure there's personality types and things that add to that a little bit, but I would agree with you. That's what leadership development programs are about. That's what's continued learning is about, is you do have to work at it. You have to understand it. You have to practice it. You crash and burn sometimes. You learn from your mistakes. It's just something that you just don't walk into a room and you have it. I mean, it's something that you develop over time.
Right. And that's it. No one is born this way. Anyone that I have worked with that is already good, or I'll hear people talk about them, their team talk about them, how polished they are, and they're born that way. This is all practice. This is what makes it so, so tough. You can read my books, you can read other people's books. You have to, though, get on the golf course, start swinging the golf club in a different
Mhm.
way, go through the many discomfort, the frustration, because the body doesn't like to be uncomfortable. Step outside of what you know to be true in order to see change. I always say, Stephen, that what doesn't challenge you will never change you. Any of your followers who have been comfortable for a while, they've not received any feedback, if ever, of their presence and how they show up or don't show up. there's a strong probability that they are at their limit of not even realizing how much farther that they can develop.
Speaking of your books, I'm always intrigued with authors. Now, you just released your third book. Now, I've seen you on LinkedIn and other places. You're busy. You're giving keynote speeches. You're coaching other leaders. You're traveling a lot. You're doing a lot of things. What's your process to write a book, and how in the heck do you have time to write a book? That always intrigues me to ask this question.
It intrigues me too, Stephen. I have a book coach. That was a big part of it because I looked at it as I gave it a shot with my second book, Influence Redefined. And this third book, Influence Elevated, I had the idea. I knew that it was going to incorporate all of our research. And what's cool about a book coach is when we first met over a year ago and I gave her my ideas, what I love about a book coach is they help you really pull apart all the ideas that you have and put it into realistic understanding for a reader because I'm so close to it, right? Then what I would do is I would go out and I would test it. I would test it in my keynotes. I would test the content with some of my mentees. And that's what always brought me back to the drawing board to say, no, that sounded good in my head. I just tried to teach someone that. It is not working. It was a lot of back and forth with this ghostwriter. My style, though, is I don't just sit and write a book and then send it out. I'm doing both. I'm writing and testing the material out with our clients at the same time, which means it's a little bit of a longer process. I know any coach that I first met with, they always said, give it like 9 months. Mine took a lot longer than that. And I think it's because I constantly would try something, test it out in the audience, and then realize it didn't work. But I'm very fortunate, Stephen. I've created a very strong team that also supports some of the logistics of putting that book together.
So a book coach is different than an editor.
Yeah.
Okay. So an
I look
editor
at,
is more like when you have kind of a finished product, or at least a lot of it,
right.
you send it to them and they help you make it maybe sound better or whatever. But a business coach is helping you figure out how to construct the book that's effective.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
It just seems, and like I just said, you written three, and so I think a lot of people do think, oh, I need to help my brand, I need to, be known better, so I'm gonna hire a ghostwriter, write a book, and then I have a book. But I think that's different than a multiple book author.
It is, and it took me time to figure out what I really wanted to do because Influence Redefined, the book that you shared here, that's still the core to all of our work. And I knew I needed adequate time to research. I wanted to research our clients, to just really talk about, since I wrote Influence Redefined, so much has changed in the world of how we connect and engage. I really wanted this third book to be about what has changed, what we are seeing as a team. Most importantly, what do you do about it? Now what? So that takes time to really accumulate and gather all of that research, then go out and test it, then come back, try it again. So it's definitely a process. And towards the end, I think if you ask any author, towards the end of the book, ready to be published, it's like this love-hate
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
relationship.
Yeah.
Because you've read the book so many times that you're just ready to say, okay, I've got to let it go.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. So, on a different subject, keynote speaker, I know you do a lot of that. How does one become keynotes? How do you get into the Hall of Fame in keynote speaking? Didn't even know there was such a thing. So,
Yes.
how does that happen?
Oh, the Hall of Fame, you get nominated by your peers. So there's what's called the National Speakers Association. You get nominated by your peers, and then there's a pretty large committee that goes through and really looks at your credentials. I had to obviously fill out an interview process. I had to answer a lot of questions of just my business and what I stand for and what speaking means to me, because having that honor of being in the Speaker Hall of Fame, it's an honor to be in that group. There's not a lot of people in that group.
Yeah.
Through a process of nomination and really them looking at my credentials, the work that I currently do, and what my goals are from this point now with that recognition, what am I going to do with that? How am I going to continue to represent that award, to represent the National Speakers Association in a way that really gives it the respect that it needs? So it was a surprise. It's like one of those awards you don't realize is going to happen. And then when it does, yeah, it just makes you look at your industry, I think, a little differently with a lot more. I've always respected it, but now with that honor, I owe it to that association to really go at it at a whole nother level.
Well, it is certainly impressive. Congratulations on
Thank
that.
you.
How many keynotes do you say you do a year?
So I have really backed down because of the amount of travel. I do 4 a month is my max.
Wow, that's still a
So
lot.
it's still a lot, yeah.
And then during
What's
COVID, you probably did 0.
it was
So
all
yeah,
virtual. You know, your
yeah,
calendar got blank in less than 24 hours, which was so scary. I remember
yeah,
sitting on my sofa with my husband that night saying, I think I'm done. And I
yeah.
remember him looking at me and saying, you're not a quitter. I've known you for how long? You are not quitting. And at that point, I'm like, yes, I am. I don't know what to do. And I moped for it, you know, felt sorry for myself for about 24 hours. And then I realized I have a whole team. And we were very fortunate because it has opened up the international door for us. We were doing a lot of international work virtually. We're kind of trying to figure it out. This just gave us that opportunity to do it.
So if you're doing 4 a month, which to me sounds like a lot, how many were you doing when you said you needed to slow
Oh,
down?
I would say, you know, it always depends on the season and when conference season is big. I would say
Right.
I was out on the road at least every week, but it wasn't Monday through Friday. So maybe one
Yeah.
week I just would be gone one day. Then maybe the next week I'd be gone 2 days. But what I started to realize, two things happened. My number one priority in my life is my health. And as I get older, and when COVID hit and I was forced to not be on the road, I realized how hard that life is and
Yeah.
how I couldn't take care of my health like I wanted to. And I know that I cannot be the best to my team, my family, my friends, my coworkers, my peers, my clients. I can only be the best when I am healthy. So that's where I really cut back on that. Like, so COVID, as much as, you know, we've all had different experiences during that time, and I
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
want to, you know, disrespect when someone had it really rough. And it really made me realize what I really wanted to do with this company.
Yeah. No, I've heard that a lot from people that there's some silver lining in that very scary and kind of
Yeah.
tragic year or two that
Oh,
we all went through. So it's really
right.
interesting. Yeah. So I know you do a lot of executive coaching, and so tell me what's your typical client, and how does that client find you? What do they want from you?
Yeah. When it's an executive, it usually is two things. They're already really good. And they just know they're that type of executive who's always looking out for development. And this is the one thing they know, that communication is a core to everything they want that they do. They want to polish it. Those are awesome because you're already working with someone that's really good. You get to
Right.
elevate them, no pun intended here. You get to really elevate them to another level. Then you've got the other individual who is told, we want you to be the next CFO. We want you to be the next COO. However, the way you're communicating now is not going to work in that role.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are those are the two that really come to us often. How they find us, you know, I've been doing this work. We turned 24 years old this year. At this point, it is a lot of referral.
Yeah.
The majority of it is referral, whether it's the current clients we're working with or it's someone had heard of us through another individual. Our clientele is very impressive. We work with a lot of Fortune 500 companies. So everything from the pharmaceutical world to the financial world to manufacturing. But it's interesting because there's always that they're super, super smart. They've worked hard. I just had a call on Friday and they want him to be, the way their organization is set up, they want him to be the next VP, vice president. And great guy is what I heard, super smart. Everyone really likes him. However, his communication, he cannot be talking to employees like that.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
too casual. The one-on-one mentoring is great because I spend some significant time with people virtually. You really, I mean, you get really close with them because it's just you and them for like 90 minutes every time that I meet with them. They're the where I get a lot of my research, a lot of my knowledge, because I learn from them just as much as they take from me.
Yeah, and I think when you just described the two different people that come to you, the one that seeks you out is all open and really excited and wants to know and
Yes.
whatever. And the person you just described that, they need some work because others have told them would probably likely be more reluctant and a little like, well, I'm doing this because I have to, and come in with a little different mindset, perhaps.
Sometimes, sometimes they're also very open because they know that it's important. We have reached a point where I believe in the perfect fit client. Otherwise, our material will not work. And the perfect fit client is someone who's
Yeah.
open, and they just get it. They get how communication is a make or break in their personal life and their professional life, because there will be a win. There will be a return on investment. And Stephen, the last thing I want to do is mentor someone knowing this isn't going to work. I don't want a company to be spending money like that and time.
Yeah. So in your business, does everyone work with Stacey, or do you have other coaches that are a part of your organization?
Yeah, we have other coaches at this point. I have a team of 6 instructors, and
Nice.
they're the ones that do all of our workshops and our deep dives. There's 2 of them that partner with me on the mentoring. And then I sit in the lane of I'm the one that does the keynoting. So
Yeah.
it all ties together, because usually if I do a keynote, someone in that audience will say, "Hey, can you come teach our teams to do this?" So it constantly fuels the way our company is set up. Each service we offer will fuel the next service.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Something else I picked up in the book that I really resonated with me. It's a simple statement, but it's so true in my opinion. Every interaction matters. So again, we get back to what we were talking about before. You can gear up for a performance of a certain meeting or whatever, but it's that every interaction from the office to the kitchen to the, back and forth, meeting with a
Yes.
lower level employee versus a high level, everything makes a difference.
Yes, and that's the other piece I think that has changed over the last 4 years. We all go virtual, and people just got sloppy the way that
Yeah.
they showed up here. Or the best is, well, I'll join a meeting, but I won't turn my camera on. Really? How can you have executive presence if you're not present? Like,
Yeah.
how are you going to have an impact? And we've just really gotten too comfortable where we realize, well, I'm at home. Yet
Yeah.
your personal brand is still being tossed out there. How people experience you is still making or break whether or not you have influence or you don't. And really thinking through, not only is every interaction matter, every interaction, Stephen, is an opportunity for you really to be thinking about, what can I improve? What can I improve about how I speak, or how I behave, or the words that I use? That's the power of elevating your influence. You don't need to carve out 1 o'clock for an hour on every Tuesday to practice. Thinking through the many interactions you're having in your personal professional life, those are all opportunities that you can be practicing.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the book, you also mentioned that I thought this was a good statement that technology has made it easier to communicate, yet more difficult to influence from Monday to Monday.
Yeah. It has, because first, I think a lot of people are struggling, at least the feedback that we get, they're struggling with hybrid, which means 2 things. Hybrid, I have people that are in the office, I see, and then some people on my team that are never in the office. That's hybrid. Or we were working with a group last week where we have people that are in the conference room with us, the boardroom, and some that are zooming in. Like, that just raises a whole level of complexity. The other piece is you have to be careful. There's so many ways you can send messages now to someone. that now even more than every message you send out there matters. Social media post, your email, you're chatting in Zoom or on Teams when you're supposed to be paying attention to what's going on in front of you. There's many layers to it, that there's this silver lining, yet now that more opportunities for us have been given to us and how we can connect, people have forgotten that means it's also more complicated, and it's even more challenging than ever before to influence consistently.
And it takes the vision too, where you also state that the goal of every conversation you have, whether it be email, text, or social media, things you post, should influence beyond that moment in time. So it's not just saying the right thing at the right time, it's thinking of what impact does this have, uh, you know, after the moment of contact, so to speak.
Totally, because that's the other side of the definition of influence, is influencing someone to take action long after the interaction has occurred. You know, trust doesn't get built in one interaction. Influence doesn't always happen in one interaction. It's a series of interactions you have with this person or group of people that is consistent. You probably can relate to this, Stephen. A really good example of this is I had a call from someone last week who saw me present 5 years ago. And she says to me, now we have the capability to bring your team in. I saw you 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And what is it? It's something that you say that resonates with your listener, that they remember. It's the feeling that they get because of how you move your body. It's how you land those words that keeps them in memory of you when that opportunity might just hit, where suddenly that relationship can start, or that relationship can go to the next level.
You know, and it's interesting too, because, you know, I think you said in the book as well, is that the one skill that is the most important is communication. Yet, a lot of times, you know, that's not taught, you know, in a way. It's like I've always said, leadership is the only thing that goes through every single profession I can think of, you know, on the globe. Yet, it's probably the least amount of instruction we get is communication, how to communicate with people, you know, different personality types, how to resonate with people, and then also, you know, how to keep it going as opposed to, you know, as you say, Monday to Monday, how to keep it going all the time as opposed to just, you know, getting pumped up for the big event and then, you know, letting it back down.
And that's the biggest challenge, because if you really want to jeopardize your authenticity, which jeopardizes the trust others have of you, is show up differently from time to time. We've seen this where social media is a prime example, where it might be someone who is very polished and genuine when you're meeting with them in person. Then sometimes you see their post on social media and you're wondering, who is that?
Yeah.
What happened? I think here's the deal. You're always under surveillance. People are always watching. The great news is, no matter what's going on in the world, you always have control over your development, number one, and getting better, educating yourself. And number two, you always have control over your brand, your personal brand, and the reputation that precedes you. Because your brand communicates who you are. It also communicates, though, who you're not.
So with 24 years of experience, I'm interested to know, let's go back to trust. Do you think there's more trust in teams these days or less? Has it changed over those 24 years?
I think there's less because of the virtual platform, because
Yeah.
leaders have not been able to, I'm generalizing here, going off of what our clients tell us, they're struggling with, if they're not getting any face time and only interaction they have via Zoom. You and I both know this works. I'm glad we've got the opportunity to do it. I will always elevate any relationship, though, when I'm in person with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's
And
just,
that's where I
yeah.
think we're not losing the trust. People don't quite trust you because they're not well, first, they're not seeing all of you, so they're not seeing what the full body language from head to toe communicates. Then if you're not on camera, well, how do you even start to build trust if the
Yeah.
camera's not on? That's a whole nother situation. Or I have many leaders that'll say, because a lot of our clients now are making it mandatory 3 days a week coming back to the office. Some of them are making that announcement as of January 1st of
Yeah.
next year. And they said, here's the deal. If there's a promotion opportunity, who do you think I'm going to think of first? I'll think of the people that I see on a continuous basis. Well, that can start to rub people the wrong way with the trust too. It's also the messaging. One of my clients did it best, where they're bringing people back to the office and they said, let's be really loud and clear that it's not that we don't trust you don't get the work done. You've proven that. This is a different conversation. This is about bringing you back to the office because we can't connect. We can't engage the same way in person as we can via Zoom.
And I think one of the most important things in that relationship is, we know that if someone does something that's inappropriate or not at the level of performance we want, or something that, we need to deal with, we know that feedback, let's call it feedback, or constructive criticism, needs to be done soon. Yet we also know it's not as effective over email or Zoom. So it's so much easier to walk into the office and say, hey, I
Yes.
noticed something today, and here's what I think. It's hard to do that on Zoom.
Yeah, we do once a quarter. I will go traveling to a city where a number of our clients are, just to stop by and say hello, to personally thank them. And every time, Stephen, I can track it. Anytime I've done that, it has increased the relationship with the client in several ways. Either they're like, this is a friendly reminder, we need to bring you back in. Or I want to introduce you to so-and-so. You need to meet that person. That doesn't happen on Zoom. There's just, I think because it's a casual conversation, we are sitting face to face. There's power behind that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, I just think of many, over my career, where when sometimes someone just needs a hug, or someone just
Right.
needs to feel the vibe you have for them in this tough moment. And that, again, that's hard to do over Zoom. It's non-existent in email almost.
Right.
So
Exactly. Yeah, you get it.
yeah. So another thing that I just love, that I read, and I can actually see in your style, I'm just going to call you out on this. I can actually see in your style that you do this very well. You said that the reason we get interrupted is not because we pause, it's because we don't pause. So, I do think you have to give space for people to react and to talk, and a lot of times we fill space with our voices and keep talking and whatever. But to give that pause, even if it's a little awkwardly uncomfortable, it's necessary.
Brevity, brevity, brevity.
Yeah.
That is the number one error, leader or not, I see people make. We say too much, we take too long to get to the point. And this is a prime example, Stephen. But if I pause, I feel uncomfortable. It's not about your feeling. It is truly about how people experience you. I worked with a comedian. I hired a comedian to work with me about 2 years ago, and he's a real life comedian. His name is Mike Goodwin. He's so good, Stephen. He's been on America's Got Talent. They brought him back when they bring like back the top of the top.
Yeah.
Mike worked with me, and we worked a lot around this whole idea of pausing. And I was asking him, you're a comedian, you're expected to be funny. I know pausing's all about it because they pause after the punchline
Yeah.
or before the punchline. And he
Right.
said, as comedians, we have a name for it. We call it pause for a cause. If we don't pause after the punchline, we step on our audience's laughter. When he told me that, Stephen, I thought that's one-on-one communication. When you're not pausing, you're stepping not only on your own thoughts of what to say next, how to adapt your message, you're stepping on your listeners' thoughts, their ideas.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when I'm working with my clients, a lot of times I will tell them that especially if it's a conflict conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and you start to begin your spiel, and you can tell they're not buying it, or they say something that they don't agree, whatever. The natural tendency is to pile on more and more facts, more and more reasons to why they need to believe you. When
Right.
if they're resistant, you can't, you got to go back to that point and agree on that point before you can go further. So a lot of people just want to keep laying layers on, and it's just not effective.
Not affected. I was coached years ago to think and speak in bullet point sentences. You're always better off to say nothing at all than to you just gave it away.
Yeah.
And it's not just those words, it's challenging your followers anytime they're not honoring punctuation, they're never silent, they're speaking in paragraphs rather than in sentences. Those are all signs that the conversation is about you versus your listeners. Not only that, too many of our conversations are impromptu. You need time to give yourself permission to think about not only what to say, but to think about, what do I say that will resonate with my listeners?
And especially when you're dealing with, again, go back to personality types. An introvert that's very analytical needs time to process that. They're not going to just fly off the, you stop in a millisecond later, they're engaged in whatever. They have to get their thoughts collected. They have to get it in order, so to speak, and then they come forward. And if you don't give them that opportunity, then they're just not going to say anything.
Once you do it once, twice, you keep doing it, they will shut off.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Uh, Another thing that I thought was interesting where you said too was passion is really what persuades people. So, you can have the most well detailed strategic plan or what you're going to do or this project or whatever, but if there's not passion around it, it's hard to get people on board and get behind it.
And where they see it, they'll see it in your facial expressions.
Yeah.
Sometimes people are talking about how excited they are, Stephen, and they're just stone cold and there's absolutely no expression.
Yeah,
That doesn't work.
that
It
doesn't
also
work.
comes through your tone, your volume, your inflection. I think the third place of the passion is the words are really resonating with your listeners. They can feel them. They can feel it's important because we mirror what someone else does. If I interrupt you a lot, you'll start to do it. I find when you really show that passion, you at least get them on the edge of their chair that they're going to consider coming on board and being influenced by you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing I thought was interesting, you said that most people uh live in the someday, so they, well, when this just happens, I know that drove me crazy when I was in my 30s. If I can just get to this level, if I can just make this much money, if I can just, get this thing, then it'll be easy and whatever. And that will drive you crazy.
Yeah. I talk about that with elevating your influence, that this really is a journey. It is like you're in a rowboat and you can see the sunset and you want to row. You want to row faster, quicker to get to the sunset. You're never going to get to the sunset. And elevating your influence is the same idea. This is a journey. There's never a destination. This also is not about being perfect and never, filling with the word again. That's not what this is about. It's about being conscious that how you're showing up in the multitude places that you show up, you're aware of if you're doing something or your words are distracting. And then you've got the tools to switch, to adapt on the fly. It's like a professional athlete, right? They swing the golf club once and the ball doesn't quite go where they wanted it to go. Well, the next attempt, they're thinking through, what did I just do back there?
Yeah, absolutely. And to take that analogy even further is you want to get to the point where it becomes muscle memory, where you don't have to overthink it.
Yeah.
It's just it becomes more like, okay, I have experience with this. I know what to do. I know what it feels like, and I need to go for that.
And the piece I always talk about stages that happen, because when I coach someone, I might be coaching them on brevity and they get so frustrated. They're like, how can I think about brevity? And now I'm trying to talk. I'm getting all thrown off. I said to them, it's like part of learning is you have to fall down. You have to get really uncomfortable. You need to get comfortable with that. It's almost like you stepped in a valley. But if you do the practice, the deliberate practice and the repetition, you'll create momentum that you step out of that valley And now you're practicing the skills that you know. And suddenly, if you get too comfortable again and you're not constantly practicing or improving, you'll step in another valley. As long as you're constantly practicing, you're never going to go and start where you started.
Right.
But it's that practice. I am in Chicago and I use sports analogies a lot because that's all muscle memory. It's so similar to what we teach. And I love Michael Jordan's statement when he says, what gets rewarded in public gets practiced in private.
Yeah.
Going back to what you had said earlier, Stephen, no one's born with these skills. It's the practice is the results that you're seeing when you say, oh, they come across so credible, so confident. Well, they've done the work. That's why.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one other thing that I noticed is you've actually hosted a TEDx event, which must have been fun. Those are amazing events.
They are so much harder than I thought. They did not ask me to speak at the event. That was not it. They had said, hey, would you come and MC the event? And I thought, how hard is that?
Yeah, yeah.
But it was. I've made some friendships. Do you know Ryan Holiday? It's a pretty
I,
popular name in the marketing space. Well, he
I
was
don't.
on the
Yeah.
stage because this has been a number of years ago that I did the MC for the event. And he was just starting out. And now he is, if you Google him, you'll see he's everywhere. And he
Wow.
started. That was
Yeah.
one of his first big things was being on that TED stage.
I went to a TEDx event in New York City once, my wife and I, and there was this singer-songwriter, went up there with her guitar, and then she did her speech, and I was just so taken with her, and it was just so amazing. And so I just reached out to her on social media and said, "Would you be on my podcast?" And she said, "Absolutely." So, you see some amazing people, and they know that you took the time to listen to them, and so they
That's
pay it forward. So it was awesome.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
are really unique events.
Yeah. So, Stacey, in anticipation of our conversation today, is there anything I haven't asked you or we haven't covered that you want to be sure to get in the program?
And I want this to be really actionable for your followers. And there's two recommendations always I give if you're really serious about elevating your influence and how you communicate your presence. First, get feedback from someone you trust is going to tell you the truth, but get it from someone in your personal life and your professional life and ask them. I want to make sure I come across trustworthy. What do I do where that comes across? What do I do where no, you question it, or you can position it however you want. Feedback also ties your own feedback. The best way to get your own feedback is to record yourself on your phone, do either an audio or a video, and then watch it back. When you watch it back, Stephen, paying attention to how did I feel during that conversation versus what reality states? Because everyone can give you feedback, right? You open up that can of worms. I'm sure you have people in your personal life that can't wait to give you feedback. But when you can start seeing yourself through the eyes and ears of your listeners, game changer. Give
Yeah.
yourself grace. If you haven't seen yourself on a playback in a very long time, if ever, give yourself grace. But to me, everything that we talked about today, Stephen, you really cannot accomplish any of that unless you've got a baseline of this is who I am and a clear understanding of what do you want. When it comes to influence, what do you want? I want to be credible. I want to come across empathetic or whatever it is. And then this feedback for yourself and from others and doing video playbacks or audio playbacks, that's going to bring those two concepts together for you to go forward and ultimately elevate your influence to where you want to take it.
Yeah, that's great. So, Stacey, at this point in the interview, I always ask my guests the same common question. So that question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could leave us with today?
Take care of your development first before you can ever lead someone else. Never ask a team to take on something you already have not exposed yourself to, or you've tried it, you've lived it. Be that leader that you truly were meant to be by someone that everyone can follow because you are the example of what you're asking them to do.
Yeah, that's great advice and well said. Well, Stacey, this has been a real pleasure. You're doing great things. I follow you on LinkedIn and some other social media, and as I said earlier, you're busy, doing a lot of great things, and It's just refreshing to see you and hear your voice, and I think we picked up a lot of great things today. So thanks for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, and thank you again. Thanks for trusting me with the followers and so appreciate what you do, Stephen.
Yeah. And did you want to include anything before we go here? You said that you had an opportunity to get an ebook.
We would love to, and I'll have you just, if you don't mind sharing the link in your show notes, it is a complimentary ebook of Influence Redefined, which is the core to everything that we do. Grab that, take advantage of that complimentary offer before you go into the third book, which is Influence Elevated. And if any of your followers ever just want to follow from afar, like you had said, we are on almost every social media channel, and we're always there as a resource.
And why don't you give us your website too, just for those who maybe don't go to the show notes?
Thank you. It's Stacey with an EY Stacey, HANKEINC.com. My full name, INC.com.
Okay, great. Well, again, Stacey, thanks so much. It's been a real pleasure. Great talking with you today.
You too.
Enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully I'll see you down the road.
Thank you, Stephen. You too.
Take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orangetheword.coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.